Well, good morning and welcome to another Catechism video. We're going to be talking or continuing on our discussion of the sixth commandment, and this is a commandment that could have so much discussion, especially with the confusion that we have in our world, where we've seemingly lost all our concepts of how male and female even interact, and whether there is even male and female. And I think this started way before our current problems, and has roots a long time ago, where we started to think that men and women were interchangeable and that there was no significant differences between them, and God didn't have design purposes. Part of that comes out of the wickedness, of sin we saw in the fall, right? This kind of relationship that was supposed to be harmonious, where male and female work together, becomes disrupted, right? And there's now fighting, and so a man who's supposed to lead and be responsibly caring for a wife now is a despot, often abusing and hurting and harming and belittling and all these sorts of things, right? And a woman who's supposed to come alongside and help and build up and be a massive part of this as well, and to be this great partner, looks to usurp and push down and also belittle and damage and hurt in her own ways the relationship. And so that becomes this fight instead of working together nicely towards what God's purposes are. Now we have these fights and all these different movements and things. We need to really come back and see what the scriptures say, and work to understand what responsibility is and leadership, and there's so much that I actually won't be able to cover it. Anything I do will sort of be a little bit missing something, but we'll look at it a bit today. And I'm going to start with our catechism, which will deal with divorce, as we've already talked about some things, and we'll also just deal with the general issues of lust. So let's look at the catechism. Sadly, that doesn't get the best resolution, but here we go anyways. Okay, what should your attitude be towards divorce? I should understand that God hates divorce, and that his desire is that no marriage be broken, right? This is a union that he creates. 1 Corinthians 7:10-11, to the married I give this command, not I, but the Lord. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried, or else be reconciled to her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife. Matthew 19:8-9, Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery. Does God intend that everyone marry? No. A person who does not need to marry to live a life pleasing to God. How is the sixth commandment broken? The sixth commandment is broken when husband and wife are unfaithful to each other and their marriage vows. Hebrews 13, for marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. The sixth commandment is also broken when a person takes pleasure in impure thoughts, desires, language, and acts. Ephesians 5:3. But among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality, or any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Matthew 5:27-28. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Ephesians 4:29. Do not let unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up, according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Okay. How can you avoid this sin? I can avoid this sin with God's help, by turning away from anything that will cause me to think impure thoughts, or to lose control of my powers to make right decisions. 2 Timothy 2:22. Flee from evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness of faith, love, peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. I think actually we're going to stop there just because of the amount of stuff that is covered, and maybe we'll talk about impure lusts next time, so we can get a bit of time with our scripture here. So we actually already saw this passage, and it kind of deals with divorce. And we see how important the union is to the Lord. And this often gets compared to, like, our marriage is sort of reflective of our relationship with God in a sense, right? There's that sort of mysterious element of what marriage points to. as this union, and it's a union of love. And when that's broken, it's always a sin, and it's always a breaking of love. Now, hear what we're talking about here. Now to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord, a wife is not to depart from her husband. But even if she does depart, let her remain unmarried or reconciled to her husband, and a husband is not to divorce his wife. I kind of see here, just a reality, dealing with some realities of life here. First off, right, the idea is not to depart, not to break up this union. Right, the basic premise for both man and woman is not to break it up. Now, what I think is interesting here is that Paul does seemingly understand the differences in men and women. It's obviously not brought out super clearly, but it does seem that he allows that the woman might depart, might have to, that there might be some sort of situation where it's just not possible for her to stay safely or whatever, because obviously men are big and strong, often quite strong, and can do a lot of damage, right? So there might be a reason for her to need to depart. But the thing is, the call is for her then is to remain unmarried, right? Not to seek another marriage, because that union is still something that needs to be sought after and repaired. And as we've heard, like, marriage is not a requirement for us. It's not something we need to do. It's a gift. And so, there's this idea that she can leave, but she shouldn't go and get married again, per se. Now that gets complicated, of course, with even what I said. There are ways to view that in certain situations where it's basically adultery. But in most cases, right, it's better if you need to leave to leave, but then not to be remarried, and to just seek to stay that way. On the flip side, though, a husband is not to divorce his wife. There is no sort of mention here of a option of leaving. He is to care for his wife and take care of her and look after her, come what may, and it's not to say that men don't get abused by women, but we're called to suffer and bear all things, and in some ways, right? And a man is to continue to care for his wife and to continue to support her as much as he can there. So let's continue. But to the rest, I, not the Lord, say, if any brother has a wife who does not believe, and so that's a struggle for some, right? We get unequally yoked, it's sometimes said. But if she is willing to live with him, let him not divorce her. And a woman who has a husband who does not believe, if she is willing to live with her, let her not divorce him. 4, the unbelieving husband is sanctified. That's a really interesting reality there, by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, right? Be unclean, but now they are holy, right? So we see a marriage union even between two unbelievers, one believer and one unbeliever, still has holy children, right? And that this is a sanctified union, right? It doesn't mean that the unbelieving partner is saved in an eternal sense, but that God is still in covenant with this family, and we've talked a lot about these family relations in church. So God is still caring and is close to this family, and then indeed, right through this, we are kind of hoping that we can indeed save our unbelieving partner. So even in a situation like that, as long as it is, everyone's agreeing to stay together, we're called to stay together. Okay, now we get into 1 Peter 3, and I'm going to start off by just saying that this is a real snapshot of things, and maybe I should have chosen a different passage, having to deal with a small time, but we're just going to look a little bit and see these kind of two relations here. So we see wives, likewise, be submissive, and it's coming off of other relationships. Submit to governments, workers submit to your bosses, or slave master at that point. And here it says, wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, right? That even if some do not obey the word, and this, you can kind of see the relation here, actually, they may be won by the conduct of their wives, right? This is getting to the point that we're not living for ourselves, which is something our world just doesn't understand. We're not about living for ourselves. And, everything, all these movements often are about seeking your own rights, your own power, but we're trying to live for others. We're trying to serve others, and so we're not in that business really. So these women here, even who are dealing with unbelieving husbands, are called to be submissive to unbelieving husbands. Called to be submissive to just as we're called to be submissive even to ungodly governments, and called to be submissive to bad bosses. Obviously, there's area to disagree when things go completely off the rails, but in general, we're called to submit and serve and help, all of us. So here we have this the chaste conduct accompanied by fear, and the call to be adorned not with all this merely outward, arranging hair, wearing gold, and all that stuff, but to have a beautiful person, to have a beautiful person of the heart, with an incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is really precious in the sight of God here, right? This is what we want. Someone, the world thinks, oh, we have to be so big, we have to be so mighty, we have to be so grand. And this goes really for all Christians, not just wives. This is how wives do this in their place, right, where they're called. We're not called to pump ourselves up and show. We're supposed to be, gentle and quiet, at peace with all men, looking to serve them and bless them, right? That is what's precious in the sight of the Lord, right? Even when you're with someone who's not perfect, and just to be serving them and trying to love them, that is good, for both men and women. In former times, right, these women submitted to their own husbands. Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him, Lord. You see this a lot, and this is this polite way of talking to him, whose daughters you are if you do good and are not afraid. And then we see here, this is really a snapshot. There's better passages for husbands than I maybe should have took them, but husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, right? Men here are called to understand and heed their wives and give honor, right? This is really interesting. Give honor, glory, assign value and worth, right? Some often men can be dismissive of women and their wives, but here the word tells us no. Right? They might be weaker, right? They're indeed very often weaker in the sense of physicalities and maybe in other ways as well. But that we shouldn't see any weakness, right? With the whole Christian paradigm, weakness is not something to be abused. Smallness is not something to be mocked at. We honor the wives. We honor our wives and lift them up. Just as we've seen Boaz consistently call Ruth this great woman and see that she's remarkable. Because indeed we see as Christians that we're all heirs together. We're actually equal in the sight of the Lord. And for men, right, this is a really interesting part. This responsibility aspect. That men, if they're not actually looking after, and this is where headship isn't just all benefits, right? It's not just benefits. Actually, it's really responsibility. And if you're shirking your responsibility and not living up to it, not actually taking care and honoring those under you, your prayers are hindered, right? And this is, everyone wants to be the head until they realize that it's only responsibility. It's only more service. It's only dying to yourself and living for others. And that indeed, when you don't do that, your prayers are hindered. There is so much more in the Bible about this, and I hope that helps a little bit and gives a little bit of information for you today. Well, the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face smile upon you.